You have exactly 4,000 weeks. That is the biological contract signed the moment you drew your first breath. 4,000 weeks to experience the entirety of existence. But here is the statistical anomaly that should make your blood run cold. Of those 4,000 weeks, you will sell 2,800 of them to a bidder you never met, for a price you did not set, to build a dream that is not yours. You believe you are the architect of your reality, but you are merely a tenant in a temporal prison so elegantly designed that you celebrate the size of your cell. You call this celebration the weekend. Stop. Look at the clock. Watch the second hand sweep past the 12. That tick is not a measurement of time. It is a measurement of loss. It is the sound of your life being siphoned away in a rhythmic, hypnotic extraction. We are taught that the weekend is a reward, a benevolent gift from the gods of industry granted to the weary worker. But what if I told you that the weekend was never designed for your rest? What if the 2-day break is actually a psychological containment field, a calculated dose of freedom just potent enough to prevent you from revolting, but too brief to allow you to escape? There is a concept in behavioral conditioning called the intermittent reinforcement schedule. It is the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. You lose, you lose, you lose, and then a small win, a payout, just enough dopamine to keep you pulling the lever. Monday through Friday is the loss, Saturday is the payout, and you are pulling the lever over and over again until the machine runs out of coins. But the coins are your life. Before we unravel this architecture, before we expose the machinery of the modern week, I need you to hold a terrifying question in your mind, a question we will not answer until the very end. If the cage door was suddenly thrown open and you were told you never had to work again, why would you likely destroy yourself within a year? To understand the cage, we must understand the architects. We must go back to a time before the alarm clock became the heartbeat of civilization. For 99% of human history, time was not a number, it was a sensation. You woke when the light hit your retinas, you ate when your glucose dropped. You worked when the task required it, and you rested when the body demanded it. There was no Monday, there was no Friday, there was only the now. This was task-oriented time. It was organic, it was cyclical, and it was useless to the machine that was about to be built. The Industrial Revolution was not just a revolution of steam and steel, it was a revolution of human synchronization. Factory owners faced a massive logistical problem. They had built expensive, tireless machines that could run 24 hours a day, but they were staffed by biological entities that operated on the erratic rhythms of the sun and the seasons. To maximize profit, the human had to be synchronized with the gear. The fluid nature of task-oriented time had to be murdered and replaced by clock-oriented time. This was the first great theft. They took the sun out of the sky and replaced it with a whistle. They took the season out of the soil and replaced it with a shift. But the human body fought back. Early industrial workers were prone to erratic behavior, absenteeism, and exhaustion. The machine was breaking its parts. The ruling class realized that working people to death was bad for the bottom line, not because of morality, but because replacing a trained worker cost money. They needed a way to sustain the battery without letting the battery realize it was just a power source. Enter Henry Ford. History paints him as a humanitarian for popularizing the 5-day workweek in 1926. The narrative is that he gave his workers Saturday and Sunday off out of the kindness of his heart, to allow them family time and rest. This is the lie. This is the propaganda. You have swallowed since grade school. Ford was not a philanthropist. He was a cold-blooded systems engineer. He realized a terrifying economic truth. A worker who works 6 days a week creates a surplus of goods, but has no time to buy them. If you are in a factory from dawn to dusk, you do not buy a car, you do not buy nice clothes, you do not travel, you merely survive. Ford didn't create the weekend so you could rest. He created the weekend so you could consume. He needed a customized demographic of people with just enough free time to use the products they were building, and just enough exhaustion to feel they deserved to spend money on them. The weekend is not a break from capitalism. It is the engine of capitalism. It is the designated time slot for the circulation of currency back into the hands of the employers. Think about your own behavior. When do you spend the most money? It is Saturday. You buy the expensive dinner because you earned it after a hard week. You buy the movie ticket to escape the reality of the previous 5 days. You buy the alcohol to numb the dread of the coming Monday. This is the cycle of compensatory consumption. We trade our life force for money, then trade that money for relief from the exhaustion of earning the money. It is a closed loop, a snake eating its own tail, and the digestion process is your life. But the horror didn't stop there. It was just beginning. The brilliance of the scam lies in how it warps your perception of the future.
We live in a state of perpetual temporal displacement. Ask anyone how they are doing and watch their eyes drift away as they say, just waiting for the weekend. We have been conditioned to view 71% of our lives, Monday through Friday, as a transitional state, a hurdle to be jumped to reach the prize. We are not living, we are commuting through time. This displacement creates a psychological fracture. We dissociate from the present moment because the present moment is owned by the employer. We exist in a state of suspended animation, holding our breath for 5 days, exhaling for 2, and then taking a deep breath to go under again. This is not living. This is controlled drowning, and the water is rising. Let's dissect the biology of this drowning. The modern workweek wages a covert war on your neurochemistry, specifically your cortisol and dopamine receptors. On Monday morning, the alarm triggers a spike of cortisol, the stress hormone. This is a fight or flight response, but you cannot fight the clock and you cannot fly from your mortgage, so you stew in it. For 5 days, you exist in a state of chronic, low-grade inflammation. Then comes Friday evening, the release. The brain anticipates the reward and floods the system with dopamine. You feel high, you feel free. But this high is artificial. It is not the joy of existence, it is the relief of the cessation of pain. It is the feeling of a whip stopping its lashes. We mistake the absence of abuse for the presence of happiness. By Sunday afternoon, the dopamine crashes. The cortisol begins to creep back in. This is the Sunday Scaries. It is not just anxiety, it is a withdrawal symptom. You are a lab rat in a cage, shaking because the lever has been locked for another 5 days. The system is self-reinforcing because it targets the young. To maintain this artificial rhythm, you must break the human spirit early. You must groom the animal. Look at the modern school system. Who designed it? It was imported from Prussia in the 19th century, designed specifically to create obedient soldiers and factory workers. It is not an environment for learning. It is a simulation of the employment contract. The bells, the rows of desks, the asking for permission to use the bathroom, the rote memorization over critical thinking, the strict adherence to time. A child is vibrant, chaotic, and curious. A student is compliant, sedentary, and watched. We spend 18 years training children to tolerate books.
To sit still for 8 hours, to accept that their time belongs to an authority figure, and to measure their worth by external grades, performance reviews. By the time a human reaches 21, the cage is no longer around them, it is inside them. They are terrified of unstructured time because they have never known it. This brings us to the dark psychology of leisure guilt. Have you ever tried to sit and do absolutely nothing on a Tuesday afternoon, even if you have the day off? You feel a vibration in your chest, a panic, a voice that says you should be doing something productive. That voice is not yours. That is the internalized surveillance of the economic machine. We have reached a point where we view our own rest as a theft from the system. If we are not producing, we are failing. We monetize our hobbies. We turn our passions into side hustles. We cannot simply paint. We must sell the art. We cannot simply hike. We must post the photo to prove we are living a curated life. The infection is total. We have turned ourselves into assets, calculating our own ROI. We are the CEO and the exploited worker of our own souls, cracking the whip on ourselves even when the factory whistle is silent. But there is a deeper, more sinister layer to this architecture. It is the concept of the deferred life plan. The ultimate promise of the scam is not the weekend, it is retirement, the golden years. The system creates a narrative that says, give us your youth, your energy, your knees, your back, and your sharpest mental years. In exchange, we will give you freedom when you are 65, physically decaying and culturally irrelevant. It is a Ponzi scheme of time. You pay in prime years, expecting a payout in geriatric years. But the currency of time devalues. A Tuesday at age 25 is worth infinitely more in terms of possibility and biological capacity than a Tuesday at age 75. Yet we trade the former for the latter without blinking. We warehouse our dreams for a future that is statistically not guaranteed. We say, I will write that book when I retire. I will travel when I retire. We act as if we have signed a contract with death to hold off until we have cleared our inbox. Death signed no such contract. Let's go deeper. Let's look at the convenience trap. The weekend scam creates a population that is time poor, but cash rich enough to buy solutions for the problems caused by the lack of time. Why does the fast food industry exist? Because you don't have time to cook. Why does the gym industry exist?
Because you sit in a chair for 50 hours a week and need to compress physical activity into a 45-minute high-intensity interval. Why does the entertainment industry exist? Because you are too mentally drained to create your own fun, so you pay to watch other people pretend to live. The GDP of the modern world is largely driven by selling people back the time and health they sold to their employers. We buy pre-cut vegetables, we buy sleep aids, we buy caffeine, we buy therapy to cope with the stress of the jobs we work to pay for the therapy. It is an economic perpetual motion machine fueled by human burnout. If we all worked 20 hours a week, the economy would collapse, not because production would stop, but because consumption would plummet. A rested, happy human doesn't need much. They cook their own food, they walk in the park, they talk to friends, they don't buy things to fill the void, because there is no void. The system requires your misery to function. This brings us to the identity fusion. The most dangerous aspect of the scam is that it strips you of your identity and replaces it with your utility. When you meet a stranger, what is the first question you ask? What do you do? We do not ask, what do you love or what do you dream of? We ask, how do you contribute to the economic engine? We have conflated human worth with labor output. This is why unemployment.
It is psychologically devastating. It's not just the lack of money, it's the lack of being. Without the job, without the structure of the week, the modern human ceases to exist in their own eyes. They become a ghost. This fusion creates a terrified compliance. We will tolerate toxic bosses, unsafe conditions, and soul-crushing boredom because the alternative is identity death. We cling to the bars of the cell because the cell gives us a shape. Now, consider the vacation illusion. The standard allowance is 2 weeks a year. That is 3.8% of your year given to you to explore the planet you were born onto. 2 weeks. And what happens during those 2 weeks? You spend the first 4 days decompressing, shaking off the cortisol, checking emails in the hotel lobby because you are terrified of the backlog. You spend the middle 3 days actually relaxing, and you spend the last 7 days dreading the return. The vacation is not a break. It is a pressure valve release to prevent the boiler from exploding. It is maintenance for the machinery, nothing more. And while you are distracted by the shiny object of the weekend, the world is shifting under your feet. The scam is evolving. The gig economy and hustle culture are the new mutations. They sell the illusion of escaping the 9-to-5, but they replace it with the 24/7. In the gig economy, there is no weekend. There's only online and offline means you are losing money. The phone in your pocket has become the new factory floor. The Slack notification is the new whistle. The chain is no longer made of iron. It is made of Wi-Fi. It is invisible, so you cannot see it to cut it. You are always on call. The boundary between labor and life have dissolved completely. You are not working from home. You are living at work. But let's pause. Let's look at the anomalies, the glitches in the matrix. Throughout history, there have been cultures that rejected this pacing. Hunter-gatherers worked perhaps 15 to 20 hours a week. Medieval peasants, despite their hardships, had more feast days and holidays than the modern American worker. The idea that we must work 40, 50, 60 hours a week to survive is a technological paradox. We have machines that do the work of 1,000 men, yet we work harder than ever. Where did the surplus time go? It was stolen. It was siphoned up to the top of the pyramid. The productivity gains of the last 50 years have not resulted in more free time for the worker. They have resulted in higher profit margins for the shareholder. You are working efficiently enough to be free, but the finish line is moved forward every time you approach it. The carrot is taped to a stick, and you are running on a treadmill powering the yacht of a man who has never worked a Friday in his life. The psychological toll of this reality is the existential vacuum. This is the term psychiatrist Viktor Frankl used. It describes the void that opens up when the distractions cease. The weekend scam keeps us running so fast that we never have to look into the abyss. We stay busy to avoid meeting ourselves. We are terrified of silence because in the silence, the questions come. Is this it? Am I happy? Who am I? The noise of the work week is a shield against these questions. And this leads us back to the most disturbing realization of all, the learned helplessness. We have been in the cage so long that the muscles required for freedom have atrophied. We complain about Monday, we celebrate Friday, but we do not try to break the wall. We have accepted the binary of work versus life as a law of physics rather than a choice of society. We meme our pain. We joke about the Sunday Scaries on social media, turning our collective trauma into content, laughing as we sink. But the horror didn't stop there. It was just beginning to mutate into its final form, the gamification of existence. Corporations are now using behavioral psychology to track not just your work, but your wellness. You wear watches that track your steps, your sleep, your heart rate. You compete with colleagues to see who is the healthiest worker. Wellness has become a metric of productivity. You must meditate, not to find enlightenment, but to sharpen your focus for the spreadsheet. You must sleep well, not to dream, but to ensure you don't make errors in the code. They have colonized your biological functions. Even your sleep is now part of the supply chain. So here we stand, 4,000 weeks, and the countdown is ticking. You are trading diamonds for plastic chips. You are walking through a gray corridor, waiting for the flashing lights of Saturday, ignoring the fact that the corridor is the destination. You are waiting for life to begin, while it is ending. Now, remember the question I asked you at the start? The open loop? If the cage door was thrown open and you never had to work again, why would you likely destroy yourself within a year? In the 1950s and 60s, researchers studied a phenomenon called retirement syndrome. They found that men who retired often died shortly after. Heart attacks, suicides, rapid cognitive decline. Without the external structure of the work week, their internal world collapsed. They didn't know how to structure a day. They didn't know how to generate purpose without an order from a superior. They faced the vast, terrifying ocean of total freedom, and they drowned in it. This is the ultimate twist of the scam. It hasn't just stolen your time, it has stolen your ability to use time. It has crippled your imagination. You dream of the eternal weekend, but if you got it, you would likely fill it with the same numbing distractions you use now, or you would spiral into madness. You have been institutionalized. The prisoner has fallen in love with the schedule of the prison. The scam is not that they force you to work. The scam is that they have tricked you into believing that without the work, you are nothing. They have built a world where the only alternative to the grind is the void. But there is a crack in the wall, a glitch, a way out. It does not begin with quitting your job tomorrow. It begins with reclaiming the real estate of your mind. It begins by realizing that the weekend is a construct and the work week is a story. It begins by observing the Sunday Scaries, not as a fear of work, but as a fear of the self. The revolution is not in the burning of the factory. The revolution is in the quiet, terrifying act of sitting in a room, alone, on a Tuesday, with no phone, no plan, and no guilt, and learning for the first time in history how to simply be. The door is open. It has been open the whole time. The only thing keeping you in the cell is you.